Hello and welcome back to the Digital Health and Wearables series. Today I have another magnificent guest for you, but before I go ahead, let me remind you to subscribe to the channel. Lots of great content from the previous guests, and also let me acknowledge our digital health platform CliniTouch V, our series partner Fujifilm Healthcare, and our science partner VivoSense. And today we have Kate Lyden. She is the Chief Science Officer at VivoSense. Kate, how are you?
I'm great, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Oh, brilliant to see you again. And today we are here to discuss digital biomarkers in health and clinical trials. I'm really excited about our interview.
Great. I'm excited to be here.
I'm going to start with the questions, Kate. Is that okay?
Of course.
So the first question that I have for you is, post-pandemic, digital transformation seems more pragmatic. And how is this effective change in work that you do at VivoSense?
Yeah, it's interesting, Joe. I mean, VivoSense has been around since 2010, and the passing of the 21st Century Cures Act in 2016 really opened the door for the use of real world data, such as data collected from wearable and connected sensors, to be used in regulated trials. But a silver lining of the pandemic has sort of been this momentum boost for these digital health solutions to really, be catapulted to the forefront of health innovation. And so, and we've seen this play out with researchers, regulators, and even patients be more open to the use of these digital solutions within drug development. But I mean, that being said, it's not been all smooth sailing. In 2020, at the height of sort of clinical trials going offline and sponsors scrambling to figure out how they keep their trials moving, we had quite a few inquiries from formerly disengaged sponsors now reaching out to us and wanting to move their trials into the real world using these tools. But, the problem was that the infrastructure and the resources weren't there for them to really take on these new solutions overnight. And so this really has been quite a process, I think, for some of these previously disengaged sponsors to really get up to speed and going with these real world solutions. And I think, for us at VivoSense, we had specifically quite a few inquiries of how do we move the 6-minute walk test into a real world situation, right? Like the 6-minute walk test is used as an endpoint in so many different, therapeutic areas. And so we frequently were asked this question. And for us, this was exciting because we have a measure that sort of parallels the in-clinic 6-minute walk test. We call it the best 6-minute effort, or B6ME. And what this is it's a real world measure of a patient's best natural effort. So unlike the 6-minute walk test, it's collected passively and it's derived from a wearable actigraphy device on a daily basis. And so we had quite a few inquiries about how do we implement this measure in our trials. And this was great. We were very excited to talk to sponsors about this. But again, this isn't sort of an overnight solution that sponsors can just take on and implement in a meaningful way. I do somewhat worry that some of these sponsors that were forced to take on these sort of solutions without, the appropriate, thoughtful study planning and resources in place, I do worry that at the end of the day, this sort of implementation, this rushed implementation may result in, the outcome not being as what a sponsor had foreseen. And so I do worry that while, yes, we have a momentum boost from the pandemic right now, I hope that continues. And I hope that there wasn't a rush to implement these tools without really thinking through the entire process, and as a result, not getting the types of results that sponsors are really truly looking for. So we'll have to wait and see. The jury is still out on that, obviously.
And Kai, thank you so much for that amazing insight. And the second question that I have for you is, what do you see as the biggest barriers to broad adoption of digital biomarkers in regulated drug trials? And also, how do we as a community work to overcome these barriers?
Yeah, wow. This is a loaded question, but I'll give it my best shot. So there are obvious concerns and challenges around sort of, data privacy, data ethics, who owns the data, those sorts of things. There are real challenges around how do we operationalize these tools? How do we implement them in a meaningful way? There's still questions about what do regulators and payers perceive as a benefit? How are they going to look at the data collected from these tools? So those are real challenges, and I feel like that list could go on. But I think that for us right now in this moment, the biggest challenge is that there's not a broad consensus on the true meaning and utility of the data that we get from different types of wearable and connected sensors. And so I think in order to really push the field forward, what we need to be focusing on as a community is building measures that are trusted and valued by all stakeholders. So researchers, regulators, providers, and certainly patients. And so I think that's really sort of the inflection point that we're at as a field. And to the second part of your question, how do we truly overcome these? I think without getting into the nuances of proper measure development, I think that there's a few sort of big picture mindsets that we can adopt as a community that will really help. And I think the first one is this idea of building measures from the ground up. So what I mean by that is not only investing in the clinical and analytical. Sorry, my dog's excited about this question as well. So not only investing in the analytical and clinical validation that's truly needed to bring these measures to scale, but also systematically investing in the qualitative research that's needed to identify which measures are meaningful for which patient populations. That can't be overlooked and expressed enough. I think that the second sort of big picture mindset is that we need to embrace this mentality of if it's worth doing it correctly. I think there's sort of this narrative that, wearable and connected sensors create this they ease the burden of drug trials in some way, which in some cases they certainly might. But I think that we can't think of this as a one size fits all approach, right? Like for every clinical population, for every measure, the right development and validation steps really need to be taken. It's not as simple as throwing an Apple Watch on somebody and then stirring the pot and seeing what we get at the end of the day. And then I think sort of the final big picture mentality is we need to think of this in the long term, right? Like using wearable and connected sensors and digital biomarkers. This is still really early days for the field. And I think that if we are going to build these trusted measures, we really need to, start to think about the fact that we may need to change course. We may need to, address certain setbacks, but we need to be, committed to this innovation. We need to invest in, not just these first round efforts, but also second versions, third versions, and potentially even fourth versions as we move forward.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for that incredible insight. You mentioned so many things there. The question was like two questions in one, but you mentioned the standardization of the data, reliability, quality of the data. No one size fits all. And I'm an advocate and fan of wearables. I've done lots of research and lots of work on wearables. And And sometimes you mention, in other words, that is a long game. Be ready to change course for iterations. You can't just expect to plug a well of a wearable and is a solution. Sometimes too much data is it works against you, and from different sources. So yeah, is really complex. But I like the things that you mentioned about building from the ground up, and also focus on certain elements such as the personalization that you rephrased a couple of times. Thank you. Moving on to another question, is which therapeutic areas might see the greatest benefit in development of digital biomarkers?
Yeah, I think that there are great use cases across therapeutic areas. Certainly, we're excited at VivoSense for their implementation, across many different disease indications. But I think I'd be lying if I said we didn't have favorites. I think at VivoSense right now, we're really focused on the oncology space. And I think that there's great potential to really move the needle there. Um, one might argue that oncology has been sort of late to the digital game. There aren't very many examples out there of people successfully using these tools within oncology drug trials. But I think that, part of that is because there's been so much innovation in cancer clinical trials in recent years, around targeted therapies and platform trials, and even using non-traditional endpoints more recently. But I think in the oncology space, one thing that, wearable or digitally enabled endpoints provides is this opportunity to measure cancer patients' lived experience. And why this is so important for cancer in particular is that, anti-cancer therapies are often toxic by nature, right? And so while we may cure or slow the progression of cancer, we oftentimes are also creating these debilitating side effects that can, be short term, or they can last, many, many years after treatment has even stopped. And so I think being able to implement these tools in these sorts of settings to really capture other components of health that are extremely important to cancer patients will be really useful moving forward. And so things like physical function, fatigue, quality of life, those sorts of things that can be used and considered by regulators in the risk profile assessment in conjunction with these more traditional endpoints of survival and tumor size and so on. So I think that, with patient-focused drug development, capturing those sorts of things will be extremely important moving forward. And then the other area I think I have to highlight at coming from VivoSense is rare disease. VivoSense has done a lot of work in the rare disease communities, and I think that rare disease spans thousands of different disease states, but I think that one of the overarching themes of studying rare disease and developing drugs to treat patients with rare disease is this burden of getting a large enough sample size, right? So reaching enough patients to enroll in clinical trials has always been a challenge for the rare disease community. And if we move these measurements into the real world via wearable or connected technologies, we can expand our recruitment reach. Patients don't have to travel to the clinic as frequently. We can also collect much larger amounts of data over longer periods of time. And so essentially increasing the power of our trial by minimizing the variability within a patient and even between patients when we have larger data sets. I think that really is an opportunity for wearables to move the needle for the drug development in rare disease.
Sure. Thank you so much. Yeah, there rare disease, fantastic work there, but also oncology, cancer, really life and death, isn't it? And truly impactful the work that you are doing. And with wearables, Also, you can do lots of different things, not just gathering the data, but facilitate the interaction. You mentioned a lot of important points there about knowing more about the patient itself, because it's not just about the data, but about their behavior, what they're experiencing, what is important to them. So really great things that you mentioned there, Kate. Moving on to the fourth and last question is around digital health. Hype and hope. What is the one overhyped aspect of digital health? And conversely, what gives you hope as the field continues to mature?
Ah, you saved the best question for last, Joe. So I'd say hype. So first, I'd like to couch this by saying I'm extremely hopeful for the future of digital health and drug development. But like any emerging field, there are areas that I think tend to get overhyped. And so I think I'd say that for digital health right now, that area seems to be the use of AI and big data to develop digital biomarkers. So to be clear, I think that there certainly is great potential for AI and big data to uncover these meaningful, components of health when used in the right context. But I think, within the context of patient-focused drug development and developing and validating these real-world digital biomarkers, I caution that AI is not the panacea for all drug development and healthcare woes. I think that, for us at VivoSense and what we do, a very sort of tangible example of this is, we often hear of AI being used within a trial to learn what outcome measures are worth measuring, and then to also detect these very small changes that are meant to indicate a treatment benefit. And I think the problem with this approach is that it removes some of the most important underpinnings of clinical trials and patient-focused drug development. Most obviously, the need for a clearly formulated and stated research question, as well as, an a priori defined statistical analysis plan, including what constitutes a meaningful, clinically meaningful difference for the patient population that you're interested in. And so I think that, when we hear of AI being used in clinical trials, what often is happening is sort of this oversimplification of how we move from raw data to, important health insights. And so I think that we need to keep in mind that in order for AI and big data to be used appropriately within drug development, we need to, really, still continue to follow, scientific methodology. So we need to have clearly stated research questions. We can't use AI as a substitute for well curated data sets or clear analytics and interpretation plans. And so I think, I guess that I'd say that is my most overhyped piece of digital health at the moment. And I just add also that I think that tech companies and analytic companies like VivoSense have a particular responsibility to be really clear on what they mean when they use the terms AI. I think they need to be very clear on what the limitations of AI potentially are within drug development. And I think that once we start to do that, we will really see AI and big data start to really realize their potential. I'd say hope. Of course, like I said, I'm hopeful for many things within the field right now, but I'd say that one thing that I'm really looking forward to see how it progresses in the near future is this combination of decentralized trial platforms with wearable and connected devices to collect these outcome measures in patients' real world environment. With the pandemic, we've seen exceptional growth from the DCT trial companies. But until recently, we really haven't seen sort of this meaningful combination of DCT platforms with wearable and connected devices. So I think that the future of that is really, really bright. And I think that as we start to combine these two pieces of technology, we'll really start to move the needle on patient-focused drug development, and really, yeah, seeing both DCTs and wearable and connected devices realize their potential.
Brilliant. Okay, what a way to finish. You mentioned so many important things there. Also, you kind of answered this hype around artificial intelligence in a niche in your focus area, because it became an overused term, as you know. Also, I've done lots of work on wearables, and for my vision is the combination of wearables and artificial intelligence will be the game changer in healthcare. And it's similar in your area in drug trials, but also you mentioned that is the beginning.
Mhm.
Everybody's trying to figure out, and also not leveraging the technology and also the wearables at the true potential. But yeah, you mentioned very important things there. I really like that. But I can see your enthusiasm and your hope for things to really evolve, and also you doing in practical terms. You actually, guys, you're doing the work. You are actually doing, because it's a lot of like hype, but it's nothing happening. But you are actually doing the work. Okay, I'm gonna round up, but before that, let me thank you for your amazing insights and your fantastic contribution. Really, really nice to see you, and let me congratulate you on your work at VivoSense.
Great. Thanks, Joe. It's been fun.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. We could have another. We could have another 4 questions, right?
Of course. Many more.
Yeah, I'm gonna round up now. Thanks for to all our viewers and listeners. Let me acknowledge our partners, the digital health platform CliniTouch V, our series partner Fujifilm Healthcare, and our science partner VivoSense. Check them out. Subscribe to the channel. Also, I'm gonna post Kate's social and LinkedIn here. Connect with her. She's a true expert. They're doing lots of great work, and I'll see you all next week.